South China Morning Post, 1st of June 2023, how seriously does the globe take Beijing as more countries turn against Beijing? China has used every trick in the book to advance in its struggle with the rest of the world to become the next superpower. Lithuanians are not interested in Chinese smartphones. The Canadians expelled a Chinese diplomat. Taipei wants to be courted by the Swiss. The Italians oppose the Belt and Road Initiative. India is doing everything it can to keep China out of its market. Nations are drawing their swords against China all around the world. They are decoupling from Beijing or, as the new buzzword has it, de-risking to make sure their future is independent of being on good terms with China. This occurred before China became a global powerhouse currently held by the United States. Beijing is not likely to prosper due to these nations' aggressive behavior. Governments worldwide are prepared to take action against the second-largest economy in the world that they dared not take against Washington. Does China's image differ around the world? Do other countries view China as having gravitas? Is China an important nation? China, more than anyone else, needs to ask itself this question. Beijing is the one that needs to change the existing quo and acknowledge what is written on the wall. Consider Canada. Canada shifted decades of benign foreign policy with Beijing in less than a week. It's not just that a Chinese diplomat was expelled, that Canada ignored China's threats of economic retaliation, or that Ottawa is compiling a list of foreign colleges and laboratories that Canadian institutions cannot collaborate with, a move perceived as being directed at China. According to recent reports, Canada is attempting to join AUKUS, the US, Australian, and Britain defense alliance formed to compete with China in the Indo-Pacific. This may be Canada's most audacious foreign policy move in a long time. Canada is moving in a new geopolitical path, siding with its partners in the West against China. The final holdouts in the West, like Canada and New Zealand, appear to be turning against China or, at the very least, prepared to take a harder line against it. It doesn't matter if AUKUS permits Canada to enter or whether its actions have any practical effect on China. In Ottawa, there has been a China rethink. How can China prevent this from spreading worldwide? Who will come after? Has any nation created a list of hostile U.S. entities that their educational institutions cannot collaborate with, even today when American power bases like the supremacy of the U.S. currency around the world are being called into question? This would go over the line. Countries fear the US more than they do China. Similar events are taking place in Europe, where Europe views China as a partner, competitor, and systemic rival, which recently adopted the word triad to define its relationship with China. It reveals the emerging attitude among Europe's power centers: China is more of a foe and competitor than a friend. Belgium. That the European Commission is looking at a CHIPS Act for pharmaceuticals to minimize reliance on China for medications. Italy is also considering leaving the Belt and Road Initiative, which would significantly lose face to China. For China, this poses a strategic issue. The Chinese never created a manual on attracting or keeping people hooked. Of course, the US is the nation that is seriously doubting China's ability to mount a defense. The notion of restricting US investment in specific Chinese industries, such as advanced chip production, or tying Saudi Arabia to I2U2, a grouping of Israel, India, the United Arab Emirates, and the US, points to the new de-risking tenet guiding geopolitics in Washington, where strategic regions and countries are being cordoned off from Beijing, even if complete decoupling of the West from China is not happening. Geopolitics used to be subordinate to economics. However, the opposite is happening as vertical globalization, the formation of geopolitical blocs marked by technological walls and hurdles, quickens. When they would never have ever entered the ring with the US, many countries are now prioritizing politics and ideology and are prepared to grapple with Beijing. Not only the allies of the US have this viewpoint. Mexico is collaborating with Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile on a lithium alliance but has resisted diversifying its foreign exchange reserves away from the dollar. China must influence how the rest of the world thinks. The most recent move by Beijing to exclude U.S. chip manufacturer Micron Technology from the Chinese market shows that China is continuing to take on this problem. Around 16% of Micron's income comes from customers in mainland China and Hong Kong, compared to 60% from Qualcomm Incorporated, another U.S. chip manufacturer. This suggests that Beijing's action against Micron was intended to send a subliminal message: China still has several options for escalating its pressure on the U.S. However, Beijing might be forced to behave dramatically due to this effort to be perceived as a serious power, such as starting a war in the area or making nuclear economic decisions. Any decisive actions by China might have adverse effects on the entire world at a time when the world is already unsettled due to the conflict in Ukraine. For many years, debates concerning China's status as a developed or developing country and how much of a responsible stakeholder Beijing is have been centered on these issues. Despite their importance, these questions are off-topic. How seriously the world takes China is the critical question. Because the response to this determines precisely what Beijing can do globally and how the rest of the world responds to Chinese bullying,